Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. You know how sometimes the simplest ideas turn out to be the most powerful?
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's exactly what we're exploring today. We're diving into the world of mini habits and how they can create massive impact.
Right. And to guide us, we've got Stephen Guise's book, Mini Habits. Smaller habits, bigger results.
Yes. And we'll also be pulling in some interesting reader reviews and a little bit of brain science to help us unpack this whole thing. So are you ready to explore the power of small?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think what's so fascinating about Guise's approach is that he tackles head-on the very reason why many of us struggle to achieve our goals.
Yeah, he talks about, that classic I'll start on Monday syndrome. We get all psyched up, set these big ambitious goals,
Right.
and then what happens?
Poof. We fizzle out before we even really begin.
It's like we're setting ourselves up for failure from the start.
Exactly. And Guise points out that this whole idea of relying on willpower to get us through is actually part of the problem.
Oh, yeah, willpower. It's like that friend who's always flaking out on you.
Huh. I like that analogy. But it's true. Willpower is a finite resource. It's like a muscle that gets tired.
Right. So you can't just keep pushing it and expecting it to perform at its peak all the time.
Exactly. And that's where mini habits come in.
Okay, so mini habits to the rescue.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
They're all about making the starting point so ridiculously small that it's almost impossible not to do it.
Like too small to fail, small.
Exactly. Guys uses the example of wanting to get into the habit of exercising.
Right.
But instead of aiming for an hour at the gym, he suggests starting with just one push-up a day.
One push-up. Really?
Yeah, now it sounds kind of crazy, right?
It does. But that's the whole point, isn't it?
Yeah, you're basically outsmarting your brain's resistance to change. By setting the bar so low, there's really no excuse not to do it.
Okay, I get that. But then what? One push-up isn't going to get me in shape.
True. But it's about getting started. It's about building momentum. Once you do that one push-up, you might think, well, I'm already here. Might as well do a few more.
Oh, I see. So it's like tricking your brain into forming a new habit.
Exactly. And it's not just a trick. It's actually tapping into the way our brains are wired. Our brains love rewards. Even completing a tiny action triggers the release of dopamine.
That feel-good chemical.
Right. So instead of feeling overwhelmed and giving up, you're getting these little hits of reward that reinforce the behavior.
Okay, so we're essentially hacking our brain's reward system.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
But there's real science behind this too. Guys talks about how mini habits actually rewire our brains for success.
Rewiring our brains, that sounds pretty intense.
It is. It's all about neuroplasticity. The idea that our brains are constantly adapting and forming new connections based on our experiences.
So every time we perform an action, even something as small as a single push-up, we're strengthening those neural pathways.
Exactly. And over time, this repetition turns that once difficult action into an automatic behavior.
So it's like we're carving out new pathways in our brains, one tiny habit at a time.
I like that analogy. But Guise doesn't just stop at the why. He also lays out a specific roadmap for cultivating mini habits in his book.
Okay, so let's talk about that roadmap. What are some of these key strategies?
Well, as we've discussed, the first step is choosing a ridiculously small starting point.
Got it. Smaller is better. What's next?
Next, you need to schedule your mini habit into your day. And make it a specific time, not just a vague, I'll do it sometime today.
Okay, so no more excuses.
Right. You're treating it like an appointment you absolutely cannot miss.
Got it. But what about those days when I'm just not feeling it? We all have those days, right? Even with a mini habit, I might struggle to get motivated.
That's where Guise's strategy gets really interesting. He talks about this concept of effortless effort.
Effortless effort. What's that all about?
It's about making it so easy to start that even on your worst day, you can still do it.
Okay, I like the sound of that. So how do we make it effortless?
Well, think about removing any barriers to action. If your mini habit is reading one page a day, keep your book open on your bedside table.
Right.
If it's doing 10 squats, have your workout clothes ready to go. The key is to minimize the friction between you and your desired action.
Okay, so it's all about setting yourself up for success.
Exactly. But I know what you might be thinking.
What's that?
Isn't there a risk that we'll get stuck in the mini phase and never actually reach our bigger goals?
Yeah, that's a valid concern.
It is. But remember, the mini habit is just the starting point. It's about building momentum, rewiring your brain, and creating a foundation for sustainable change.
So it's like that first domino that sets off a chain reaction.
I like that analogy.
Yes.
Once you've established a mini habit and started to experience success, it's natural to want to do more.
Right. So you start with your one push-up, and then you find yourself doing 5, 10, maybe even a full workout.
Exactly. It's what Guise calls the bonus reps phenomenon.
Bonus reps. I like that. It's like you're exceeding your own expectations and building confidence in the process.
Exactly. And that's where the real magic happens.
I'm starting to get really excited about this. What about you?
Me too. It's
Yeah.
amazing how such a simple concept can have such profound implications.
I know, right? And we're just getting started.
Yeah, stay tuned because we're about to dive even deeper into the world of mini habits and explore how they can transform your life.
This is reminding me of that reader review we saw on Amazon. They were saying they finished Guise's whole book in just a week,
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
just by committing to 10 pages each day.
Yeah, and it really highlights how powerful that consistency can be.
Right, like 10 pages might not seem like much,
Yeah.
but over time it really adds up.
Exactly. And think about it. That reader probably didn't feel overwhelmed by the prospect of just reading 10 pages.
Right.
And yet they ended up finishing the entire book.
It's really making me think about how I approach my own goals.
How so?
Well, I tend to get so focused on the big picture, the end result, that I often forget to just appreciate the journey, those
Yeah.
small wins along the way.
That's such an important point, and it's something Guise emphasizes too. He talks about celebrating those mini victories,
Right.
no matter how small they seem.
Yeah.
Each time you complete your mini habit, take a moment to acknowledge that success. It reinforces the behavior, and it keeps you motivated.
So instead of beating myself up for not hitting some arbitrary goal, I should be focusing on celebrating those tiny steps forward.
Exactly.
That's a pretty big shift in thinking for me.
It is, but it's a much healthier and more sustainable way to approach personal growth.
Okay. So remember how we were talking about willpower being a finite resource?
Yeah,
Well, Guise argues that by focusing on mini habits, we're actually conserving our willpower.
that's right. Because when we set these huge, daunting goals, we're essentially relying on willpower to force ourselves to do things we don't really want to do.
Okay.
But with mini habits, we're making the action so small that it requires very little willpower to get started.
So we're freeing up our willpower reserves for other things.
Precisely. Like making difficult decisions or resisting temptations.
Right. That makes sense.
And as we continue to practice our mini habits, they become more and more automatic, requiring even less willpower over time.
It's like we're building these positive habits without even having to try that hard.
Exactly. And this ties back to the science of how our brains work. Remember the basal ganglia we talked about earlier?
I think I need a quick refresher.
Right, so the basal ganglia, it's the part of the brain that plays a key role in habit formation.
Okay.
As we repeat a behavior, the basal ganglia takes over, making that action more and more automatic.
Got it.
So with mini habits, we're essentially training our basal ganglia to take over those desired actions.
Wow. This is all starting to come together. So by starting small and being consistent, we're not only creating new habits, but also literally rewiring our brains for success.
Exactly. Guise really highlights the importance of understanding how our brains work in order to achieve lasting change.
Yeah.
It's not about forcing ourselves to do things we hate. It's about working with our brains, not against them.
I love that.
Yeah.
So if our listeners are feeling inspired and ready to implement some mini habits in their own lives, what advice would you give them?
Well, first of all, I'd say choose a goal that genuinely excites you. It could be anything. Improving your fitness, learning a new language, writing that book you've always dreamed of.
Yeah.
Once you have your goal, break it down into the smallest possible steps.
Like ridiculously small, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Remember, the smaller, the better. Then schedule your mini habit into your day, like an appointment you can't miss.
Okay.
Make it visible. Write it on a sticky note.
Yeah.
Set a reminder on your phone, whatever works for you. And this is key. Remove any obstacles that stand in your way.
Got it.
Make it as easy as possible to perform your mini habit.
Right.
Prepare your environment, gather your materials, eliminate any distractions. And don't forget to celebrate those small wins.
Yeah, celebrate those wins.
Acknowledge your progress, even if it seems insignificant. And remember, consistency is key.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Don't get discouraged if you miss a day here and there. Just get back on track as soon as you can. The power of mini habits lies in the long game.
It's about showing up for yourself, even in small ways, day after day.
Exactly.
And I'm really starting to see how powerful that can be.
I think one of the most amazing things about mini habits is that they can create this ripple effect in other areas of your life.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, when you start experiencing success with one mini habit, no matter how small, it boosts your confidence.
Okay.
And that confidence can spill over into other areas, inspiring you to take on new challenges.
So it's not just about achieving specific goals, it's about cultivating this growth mindset,
Yeah,
a belief in your own ability to change and grow.
exactly. Many habits become a gateway to a more empowered and fulfilling life.
This is making me wonder, what are some examples of mini habits that people have used successfully in different areas of their lives? I mean, we've talked about exercise and reading, but what about things like productivity or creativity?
Oh, there's so many possibilities. For productivity, imagine starting each day by just clearing your desk for 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Or answering one email.
Exactly.
Hmm.
For creativity, what about sketching for 5 minutes or writing one paragraph of a story?
Or listening to a piece of music that inspires you.
Exactly. The point is to break down those big, daunting tasks into bite-sized actions that feel manageable.
Right.
And remember, what might seem insignificant at first can lead to remarkable results over time.
Okay. I'm convinced I'm ready to start experimenting with some mini habits of my own. What about you?
Me too. I think we both learned a lot from this deep dive.
Definitely. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the science behind habit formation to the practical strategies for creating lasting change.
Yeah, but I think the most important takeaway is this. You don't have to wait for some big moment of inspiration or rely on willpower alone to achieve your goals.
Mm.
You could start small right now with a mini habit that feels ridiculously easy.
And those tiny steps taken consistently over time can lead you to some incredible places.
It's a journey, not a race. And sometimes the most rewarding journeys are the ones that begin with the small steps.
You know, one thing that really stood out to me in the book was Guise's emphasis on identity-based habits.
Oh yeah, that's a really interesting concept.
Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. So Guise argues that real lasting change comes from shifting our identity, not just our actions.
Mm.
It's about becoming the kind of person who does the things we want to do.
So instead of saying, I want to exercise more, I should be saying, I am an active person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
By aligning our actions with our desired identity, we create this powerful internal drive that keeps us moving forward.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right.
If we believe we are active people, we're more likely to actually engage in active behaviors.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
And that's where mini habits come in. They serve as these small but consistent actions that reinforce that desired identity.
Okay.
So each time you complete your mini habit, you're basically proving to yourself,
Okay.
hey, I am the kind of person who does this.
It's not just checking off boxes. It's about embodying that new identity.
Exactly. One mini habit at a time.
That's really powerful. I have to admit, this whole conversation has been kind of a mind shift for me. Yeah, I've always approached personal growth with this all or nothing mentality. Like, if I couldn't commit to some huge sweeping change, I felt like I was failing.
I think a lot of people feel that way.
But now I'm starting to see the beauty of those small, consistent steps.
And the great thing is that those small steps are accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
No matter how busy you are, no matter what challenges you're facing, you can always find a few minutes to dedicate to a mini habit.
That's so true. And I think that's what makes this approach so appealing.
Yeah.
It's not about adding more stress to our already crazy lives.
Right.
It's about finding those little pockets of time and using them strategically.
It's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. And trusting that those small steps will eventually lead us to some pretty amazing places.
I love that. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of mini habits, what's one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
That's a good question. What if instead of focusing on how big our goals are, we just shifted our attention to the tiny actions we can take right now?
That's a great point.
What if instead of waiting for the perfect moment, we just embrace the power of starting small?
Yeah. Where could those tiny steps lead you in a month, a year, or even a lifetime?
That's something for everyone to think about. What's one mini habit you can commit to today that will move you closer to your goals?
Remember, change doesn't have to be overwhelming. It can start with a single push-up, a single sentence, a single step in the right direction.
And from those small beginnings, amazing things can happen.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into mini habits. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit inspiring.
We had a lot of fun putting this one together.
We did. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep taking those tiny steps that lead to big results.